Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight on Security. I'm Tanya Chin, and I head up corporate communications and investor relations here at Cohesity. I'm delighted to be your host and thrilled that you're joining us today. Spotlight on Security is a great place to get the inside scoop from the sharpest minds in the security game. The series is dedicated to exploring a wide range of topics, all centered around one common core: security. Today's episode focuses on the importance of teamwork in data security to achieve cyber resilience, whether it's across the industry or between teams within an organization. That's what we'll be covering today. And we have an incredible lineup. Our first guest, Tim Fleming, who's a cybersecurity author and director of technology at the fifth largest school district in Georgia, will join Cohesity CISO Brian Spanswick. Tim will share how a team-focused approach builds a stronger defense against cyber threats. And we've also invited Nathan Lee from the New York field office of the Secret Service to join Brian Adair, Cohesity Director of Systems Engineering, for a discussion about Nathan's experiences. In their session, we'll hear firsthand how the best laid game plans don't always prevent an attack and offer strategies to make sure that you are protected. Before we introduce our guests, let me kick off the event with a poll question. If you were a part of a team responsible for the security posture at your high school, what data would you protect first? Would it be grades? 100%. Detention records? Asking for a friend. The yearbook, where we all first learned to put our phone number in our signature, or the cafeteria menu? Anybody have any responses? Looks like grades are winning. All right, well, I think we can all agree that not all data is created equal when it comes to protecting it or recovering it. So thanks for playing. Speaking of participation, please get your questions ready, because this next session is a perfect opportunity for you to ask a couple of your peers any question that you might have. So please welcome Brian Spanswick, Cohesity CISO, and Tim Fleming, Director of Technology Services for Forsyth County Schools.
Thanks, Tanya. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Tanya.
Great to have you both. Brian, you're a cybersecurity leader with a background in supporting high-growth companies, including McKesson and Splunk. And of course, you play a key role here at Cohesity to advance IT and security for both our company and our customers. And Tim, you also have a very impressive resume. You started your career in law enforcement. You've authored Cybersecurity Unboxed, and you lead the IT and security team at Forsyth County Schools, which is known for its tech-forward approach to learning. I know our audience would love to hear how each of you work together with different departments within your organization or your district to ensure that you're cyber resilient. And for that, Brian, I'll hand it over to you to lead this first segment.
Great. Thanks, Tanya. And Tim, welcome to Spotlight on Security. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, as Tanya set this up, the cybersecurity threat landscape has really evolved over the last couple of years. And the teamwork that's required inside of an organization is just higher than it's ever been, or the need for it is higher than it's ever been. As these cybersecurity threats evolve, where within the organization does responsibility lie for keeping data and IT environments safe, both from internal and external threats?
That's a good question. So, there used to be a separation between the IT department and the core business of schools. One was educating kids, and then IT was kind of a support for that, but not part of the core business. And cybersecurity kind of fell under the IT department as their responsibility, but again, not part of the normal school district, just outside of that. But that's really changed over the past 10 years, especially when COVID hit. IT became an integral part of what was going on with the core business of educating kids when they went home, or whether it was virtual environment. It was part of what IT was part of the core business of school districts. So for us, we really looked at how do we get everyone involved in the decision making. So we created a cybersecurity committee. It's a committee of about 15 people, and every department's representative. So HR is represented, finance, maintenance, facilities, every department that we have is represented on that committee, and they're a voting member. And the technology department are really the experts that come in and tell them what we feel like is important for them to know and about cybersecurity and where we should go as a district. But yet we only are one piece of that. We're just the people who give them the information. It's then up to the committee to actually vote on that and decide the direction that the district handles or heads for cybersecurity. So it really took the separation of the two and kind of put them back together as cybersecurity not being an IT department responsibility, but a district responsibility.
There's a couple of things that you said there that I find really interesting, and certainly in some of the organizations I've been in the past has been a challenge. One is getting IT and InfoSec working together. I've seen traditionally, certainly going back 5 years plus, where InfoSec was really seen as a compliance function, and IT had the responsibility to comply, but also to keep the business running, to ensure that operations can occur. It sounds like the approach that you guys are taking is making InfoSec more a feature of the IT services as opposed to an audit function. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I really think that's where everyone is heading. I think you almost have to head that way. But for school districts, I think it's vitally important as we move forward, at least for ours, it is.
The other thing that you hit on that I thought was really powerful is if I was understanding how that committee works correctly, you're really getting the owners of those different functions to be accountable for the security posture, to be accountable for security being part of the way of the operations, as opposed to having that outsourced to the InfoSec team or the IT team.
Yeah, and when we first started the committee, a lot of people from the departments, they said, "Oh, well, I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I shouldn't be on the committee." But we don't need cybersecurity experts to be on the committee from the department. We need you to be an expert over your department and what y'all do. We'll bring the cyber side of it, the technology side of it, and help you kind of see the vision and the problems and concerns that we're trying to address. We need you to say, how does this affect my department? How does it affect me? How does it affect the people who I'm responsible for? So really, for us, it's been a really big undertaking to really get them to see the importance of what they do for their department and how cybersecurity fits into that.
As you're going through that example, I was surprised at how much similarity there is. You working with a school district and me working with a software technology corporation. I have the same challenge. I've got business partners internally that even though we're a technology organization, don't claim to be technologists. Yeah. And so the responsibility of helping them make informed decisions of how they manage their cyber risk, and making sure they're accountable for those decisions. It sounds like it's a similar challenge that you guys are facing. And that's the same challenge I have with my board of directors, is how do I make sure that they've got a good understanding of what risk exists and how they make an informed decision. It's interesting, the parallels there, because I would have thought that there would be more differences just because of the different industries. Go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say, and really, when you look at the business community, the school system is just kind of a microorganism of that. We have kind of all the similar departments that a large business would have. It's just kind of maybe on a different scale, maybe smaller scale for some or larger scale, for other school districts. So I think the similarities are that way because we're so similar in what we do. Maybe our core function's a little different, but we each have the same responsibilities.
Well, with that in mind, those similarities, I'm curious your response to my next question. One of the things that I've seen as I've been in this space for the last 10 plus years is that the priority of IT or of InfoSec investments have really been around preventing a breach, preventing attack. And that is certainly important or critical as a part of an overall security posture. But one of the things that strikes me over the last couple of years is that the attackers are getting more sophisticated. They have access to a lot of the same tools and technologies that corporations do. There's really the barriers of entry for these attackers has really gone down. Yeah. And being able to prevent the breach, you can never have 100% confidence, but it seems like that confidence level goes down a little bit. And so now there's a need to have more of a balanced approach to your security posture, where in addition to making those investments in protecting or preventing a breach, we also have to make investments in how do we minimize the impact if breached. How does that figure into your guys' security strategy?
Well, for us, I think one of the big keys, since we're dealing with so many different people, is really setting a clear expectations about what we will do as cybersecurity as a district, what we'll do for that, and really setting that constant communication. I think about when you start dealing with cybersecurity, I think it has a direct correlation to what we see in airport security. When you go into an airport, you don't see anybody that walks in and finds out they have to go through a metal detector and that you have to take your shoes off, and they get mad and they walk outside and they're upset for the next hour because I had no clue I was going to have to do that and I shouldn't have to. Well, the same is kind of similar with us. If we set our expectation, if we're clear on what we've got, then they understand that there are barriers to get onto the internet. There are barriers to get onto software that you use. So it really is important that we set those expectations. And then once people understand it, I think they can move forward and not be upset, but also understand the limitations of what they're going to be doing. And then I think also equally, it's making sure that you have the right products and right processes and right procedures in place to be able to handle all the different elements and pieces of the puzzle for cybersecurity.
You and I talked a little bit in preparation for this session, but I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you, a question that we didn't discuss before, but it strikes me as you're talking about the fact that you are supporting a wide variety of users, which includes students. And one of the things that I struggle with is I think the biggest vulnerability that we've got internally is the human-based controls, trying to train people to do the right things or not fall for a phishing attack or not expose the organization. You guys have to have that problem significantly more in a more complex situation than a corporation does. How do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the data that we have, and really school districts in general have just a ton of data. We have about 60,000 students. And, if you look at about half of that is grade 6 and under. So these are students who are not going to be checking to find out if they've had a breach probably until they try to apply for their first credit when they turn 18, 19, 20. So when someone gets our data, a lot of times they will have that data and be able to use it for 8 to 10 years before the person even realizes that their data has been stolen. So that's really important for us to make sure that we take care of our data. We do that by a lot of different tools and making sure that we have a resilient data center and making sure we have backups offsite and things like that. But also we deal a lot with data loss prevention, not clicking on things you shouldn't click on. If someone sends you an email, and in that email, there's a link, but yet you don't know the person and you're not expecting anything, then teaching our employees and our students not to click on that. And, training is always one of the hardest things to do. A lot of times it's not expensive to do in that you're not having to go buy, $1 million appliance to do it, but you're having to spend time with each one of them and make sure that they understand why they're doing this and how to prevent these things from happening. So for us, we spend a lot of time with email security, with multi-factor authentication, making sure that whoever is logging in is the correct person. And sometimes that can be in multiple ways. It can be, to log on to the computer may be one area that we look at. Getting into email may be another, or getting into student information where you have student records, maybe even a different level that we have to look at how we're implementing to prove that this is the correct person getting in to the data and that they have rights. And that's the other big thing for us. We don't give you rights to things that you don't need. It's not like, every teacher has rights to every kid. There's just no point in that. You have rights to your kids. The data that you see are for your students. So if you're a elementary school teacher, that might be, 100 students, and that's all you would see. So we really restrict what they're able to do in case they're breached. It doesn't cause an issue for more people than it should have to.
Well, a couple of things that you stated there that really ring true for me. One is, as I was asking the question about human-based controls, you also came back to how you guys minimize the impact if there is if there's a vulnerability in those human-based controls. That pays both from a social engineering perspective or any other way that your perimeter gets breached. And the other thing that you were hitting on there that we're trying to do inside of our corporation is I can't just rely on training. Training is important. We've got to make sure that we are educating and continue to do that. And how do we make sure that they just have what they need, least privileged access,
Yep.
role-based access controls, so that we can even protect them from a lot of times it's user error that causes a cyber event, and trying to and protecting the organization for ourselves sometimes is super critical. Tim, I really enjoyed the conversation and really the similarities between our organizations, which coming into this I really didn't see. I find really striking. I think we're dealing with a lot of the same challenges, and it was great to hear how you guys are approaching this. Thanks for your time, Tim.
Thank you, Brian.
Antonia, back to you.
Brian and Tim, thank you both for sharing your perspectives on cyber resilience with us. Tim, I loved hearing your experience about working closely and getting buy-in from each department in your school district and the communication that goes along with that process, as well as the care that you take for your employees and students' data. But before we close out, we have a question from the audience, and this one's for you, Tim. You mentioned that you have a cybersecurity committee. What topics are top of mind for your district?
Well, I think there's a lot of them that we deal with. We have monthly meetings, but right now, I think the biggest one that we're talking about is exactly what Brian and I were just discussing, and that is data loss prevention, whether that's through email security or third-party applications or groups that are vendors that are coming in to do work for us. How do we make sure that they only have access to the data they're supposed to have? We limit that data, and then that we do training around what to click on, what not to click on, so that we don't get compromised with phishing attempts.
Great. Well, with that, we'll wrap the segment up. Thanks to both of you for being a part of the Spotlight series.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
Joining us for our final segment is Nathan Lee from the Secret Service New York Field Office. Nathan's going to share his experience and insights from his role investigating cyber attacks in recent years. Let's welcome Nathan and our moderator, Brian Adair, who's the Director of Systems Engineering here at Cohesity.
Thank you, Tanya. And Nathan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian.
Great to have you both. Over to you, Brian.
Well, Nathan, thanks again for your time today. I think that we're all excited to hear your insights in the day-to-day challenges that the Secret Service is dealing with, and how they help other organizations solve some of these tough cyber challenges today. I think one of the things we wanted to chat about today is really understanding, the Secret Service's role. But I thought we'd start with a little bit about your background, and then maybe transition into a little bit about how the Secret Services helps in fighting cybercrime.
Well, the Secret Service doesn't really stay very busy. We don't really do all that. I'm just kidding. I've been with the Secret Service about 20 years. Started out on the West Coast. I know a lot of the guys here on the broadcast. I say good morning. It's afternoon here on the East Coast, right? So about 20 years. Started cyber really in 2005, 2006. Got forensically trained when I started in the Seattle field office. Worked a lot of network intrusion type cases, DDoS cases, stuff like that. Kind of the stuff we saw back when. The evolution of it. I got forensically trained, computer forensics, stuff like that. Got cell phone trained, all that kind of stuff. Just kind of the evolution. I did, my protection time. You guys know we all do protection in the Secret Service. I did that for 6 years, 2011, 2017, with the best protectees we've ever had. Sorry, a little plug for former President George H.W. Bush and former First Lady Barbara Bush. Great family, great time for me in the Secret Service. When I left them, I went back to the Houston field office, got into the then current or still current cyber crimes, the business email compromises, the crypto stuff, the ransomware is big, right? So just kind of the evolution there. But I did want to put, because I know you were going to ask, my Kool-Aid answer is that we prevent, detect, mitigate with the ultimate goal of arresting and convicting the most harmful criminals when we associate with cybercrime. So I want to throw that out there for you.
No, that's good. I was really in my preparation. I was surprised to see how many areas that the Secret Service is really, helping our nation, stay secure. And looking through the website, I noticed that there was a lot of documents and guidance around, how to secure an organization, what to be on the lookout for. You've got a pretty robust set of guidelines just right on the Secret Service website. So I encourage our audience to take a look. A quick Google search to, Secret Service and cybercrime. You'll find some great material. But one of the statements that I saw that really piqued my interest, and I wanted to see if you had maybe some more history behind this. But I saw a statement that said the Secret Service's goal is to protect the nation's financial infrastructure and maintain a safe environment for the American people to conduct financial transactions. Our mission is to investigate complex cyber-enabled financial crimes. I was amazed when I saw that. I had no idea that was part of your role and responsibility there within the Secret Service. Can you give us a little bit of history about how that came to be?
Sure. And the funny thing is, a lot of people, I'd say 85% of the nation probably do feel that the Secret Service is all about protection, and that is true. We do that. But historically, 1865, right? The Secret Service was formed in 1865. It was actually to combat counterfeit, right? So we actually didn't even start our protective mission until about 1901. Well, not just about. It actually was 1901. Coincidentally, fun fact for you, it was actually President Lincoln that created the Secret Service in 1865. So as luck would have it, we were not his protector back in the day, because we didn't start our protective function until 1901. But with the transition of basically any monetary instrument, what's happened historically, we started out with counterfeit, 150 plus years ago. We evolved to follow the financial institutions, right? So we were historically in the Treasury Department. We started in the Treasury Department in 1865. So we went from counterfeit. We still investigate counterfeit, but we went to bank frauds, to credit card frauds, to identity thefts, to crypto, right? So we have made the transition as monetary instruments and just the interchange of money has changed over the years.
Well, and to your point around these crimes, especially ransomware these days, is very much centered around extracting some type of financial payment, generally through through crypto of some sort. But I think that's where our two organizations align really well. We end up protecting a lot of the data for the world's largest financial organizations, and I think they are up against some of the most stringent time sensitive needs. But as we look at the broader, I think mark of, I think this month is the 25th anniversary as our Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and as you look at your time over the past couple decades, and as this landscape has evolved and matured, what do you think or how do you feel organizations are today? Do you feel like they're better prepared and aware of the threat? Is their security posture, vulnerabilities in a better position than they were years ago?
I think so. I think we're getting there. I mean, you're going to have different levels, obviously, within different organizations. All your large companies definitely are seeing the necessity for, a strong cyber posture, if you will. With that comes like stuff that Tim touched on, right? Well, he didn't touch on it. He spoke about it very clearly, but your multi-factor authentications, limiting accesses. Like he gave a great example of don't every teacher doesn't need access to every student's information. They only need the information that they're need to have dominion over, if you will. So within companies that holds true too, right? So if you can limit accesses, if you can have the appropriate preventative measures, right? Your firewalls, all that kind of stuff, kind of the normal preventative things that you can do within a company. then you can prevent, at least mitigate some of these attacks. And I think a lot of companies, large and small, are really moving towards that.
And I think you'd agree that most of these attacks do, have some form of breach of credentials into an organization, getting their hands on an account, that has too much power. And to your point, being able to limit that down and make sure that it's restricted to kind of least access is really best practice. When we go to talk cybersecurity, we often think of, the things like MFA, the technology, the cyber vaults that we need to have in place. But there's a lot of other things, people and process involved other than just the tools. And we know that the adversaries are becoming increasingly more sophisticated, especially being able to leverage some of these powerful AI tools. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of people and processes and reducing an organization's cyber risk? And specifically, I know in the past you've worked with some of these large financial institutions around tabletop exercises, days long tabletop with functional groups within an organization. Could you share some takeaways? So again, what are some of the processes and people things that we need to think about, and then what are some of those takeaways from some of those more interesting tabletop exercises you've done?
Sure. Well, I think something we had discussed in the past, like if you have 1,000 employees, right? Kind of an oversimplification, but if you have 1,000 employees, right, then you have a potential of 1,000 kind of end user potential threats, if you will, right? They're not the threat, obviously, right? But if they do click on, as Tim mentioned earlier, if they click on that email, if they forward that email, if they are visiting, questionable websites or whatever it is, whatever accesses that those individuals have, or even if someone's moving within a network, up, getting up in the levels where they can move, horizontally as well. So it comes down to the education of those people within the organization, right? Specifically, you asked about a tabletop exercise. Yes, and that also, Tim had a great lead into this. I hate that I keep going back to you, Tim, but you spoke very well. What we did was, historically, I think a lot of companies see it's the IT problem, right? It's the CISO, it's the IT individuals that was the cybersecurity end all be all, right? Well, I won't say most, a lot of companies are seeing these days that it's not just those guys. These specific tabletops that I have done, you have HR in there, you have legal in there, you have the media guys, you have the operators, you have, right, internal and external sources, like they all sat at these tabletops so that they can see how it affects each one of their roles within the organization, but they also get to see how it works as a whole. And probably most importantly, you get to see who you really need to contact within those different shells of your own organization, to where you can really stop. If you're dealing with it, it means it already happened, right? So at least you can stop or mitigate the response at that point. So
that's I think when we look at the tabletop exercises that we've done with some of our partners and customers, there is a realization that it does take a village to really protect the organization, and these exercises are good at bringing these different functions and groups together to talk through it. And I'm surprised at some of the questions that come up during these tabletop exercises. One of the things you mentioned about just notification, right? When an event does occur, how are you going to notify folks? And one of the scenarios we have in that exercise is, hey, the email system is down, has been compromised. So do you have a phone tree list ready to go? Like, how are you going to contact everybody to rally the troops and really deploy the plan? Just that one basic is just the smallest little piece of the really large tabletop exercise, right? To flush out the details and planning that really is required. Now you've got, I know when we talked earlier, you've got some interesting stories. I know you wish you could share some of the
Well,
the
we're
real
full of
good
stories for
stuff.
sure.
But yeah, do you have something you could share with our audience in terms of maybe a customer that really did everything right? You know, they had a check mark in all of the important boxes, but still had a challenge at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I see we're ticking down. I'll try to be quick. Um, so this had to do specifically with a business email compromise, right? And this company had done everything appropriate, right? They set up multi-factor authentications. They set up, even to a point at which I'm going to oversimplify, a point at which before money transfers happened, they had to call a number that was specifically in the email from, the money transaction people within the company, that they're supposed to call and get a further authentication after the fact. So they did all of this stuff, and they called, and they got the confirmation email, and they called the number that was set up in a foreign country. And it was, yes, that was us. And yes, we did change the banking information, and so on and so forth. And they send all this ridiculous amount of money overseas. But as it turns out, what had happened about 3.5 months before, because like when we got involved, we went back and dug through a plethora of logs.
Sure.
But we found that it was about 3.5 months prior that the intrusion had actually occurred. And then they had over time changed email settings. They over time had changed the number to call. They over time changed the outgoing messages of the people that would be involved in the transfer and everything else. So even when, as you said, even when you are really doing everything you're supposed to do, the criminals are pretty smart, right? They can get around some of our best laid plans.
Right. You can sit there and watch the emails go back and forth within the organization about how they're going to negotiate, this situation, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, as we kind of come to our final question here, cyber security is a team sport. It requires, I think a lot of the private companies to share information so that the broader team can understand the threat, but also, share that with our public entities, organizations, and law enforcement. What would you ask of general, in a general sense, organizations to do? What could they do better to partner with law enforcement and other government organizations?
I would just push to keep, the employees just abreast of the current trends, right? Anybody can go in and Google, what are the top 10, cybersecurity threats, right? And you can click on one of those links, don't click on every link, right? But, go to the ones that are from CISA, or ones that are from the Secret Service or from the FBI, or you can even go to our pages direct, and you could type in, what are your current cybersecurity threats? And then, touch on the ones that you really think would affect your organization. And then I always say, if and when, there is an issue or something that does pop up, what I always like to refer to as phone a Fed. I'm going back to the, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire days. Phone a Fed. Doesn't have to be a Fed. It can be state and local county partners. We're partnered up with all of them. So let law enforcement know as early as possible. And we may not be able to come in and put the Band-Aid on it and come fix everything, but chances are we've seen it, we've dealt with it, and we can at least give you some guidance.
Well said. And I wouldn't underestimate the tools, resources, and experience that law enforcement and these organizations can bring to bear in these situations. Seen it on multiple levels before. Well, that wraps up our time today, Nathan. I'm so happy you were able to join us and get the perspective from your time at the Secret Service and what you've seen out there in the field. And we appreciate you sharing your insights and guidance. Well, let's go ahead and turn it back to Tanya to close out today's session.
Thank you, guys.
Great. Thanks so much, you guys. We have a couple questions, Nathan, as you can imagine. The first one's coming in from Sergey, and he wants to know, does Secret Service differ in its jurisdiction over types of cyber crimes they go after versus the FBI or other federal agencies?
So we actually don't differ. We have a concurrent or overlapping jurisdictions, however you want to look at it. we're all federal agencies, right? So there's HSI, Homeland Security investigations, as well as, you know, FBI and you know, Secret Service. What you'll find is, you know, we used to be very segmented, right? The ATF investigated bombs, and the DEA investigated drugs, and the Secret Service investigated counterfeit, and you know, that kind of stuff. No criminal does one crime, right? If you're doing counterfeit and identity theft, and you're using crypto and all that kind of stuff, you're probably also doing drugs and running guns and the whole thing. So what you see is a lot of cross-jurisdictional situations, a lot of issues or a lot of instances where we're working with DEA, FBI, you know, ATF. We're all working with each other. So you can call all of us or one of us or whatnot, but we're probably all going to talk to each other regardless of who you call.
Great. And a last question for you. How do you see cyber criminals and the need for cybersecurity evolving in the future? That's a big one, but how do you see the evolution?
Well, so I did a threat casting thing with one that we projected with a company where we projected out 10 years, right? What do we see, or what do we think is going to happen in 10 years? Everyone wants to kind of lean on AI, and everyone wants to lean on maybe machine learning, stuff like that. And that's going to be a problem, right? Criminals can use those things as well. But as with anything, whatever you put into those programs is what you get back, right? So it depends on the sample sizes of when you start dealing with AI and stuff like that. But what I'll kind of say to that is we expect to see the same types of crimes, right? We always, if you break it down to the simplest terms, you just got to follow the money, right? Criminals don't do crimes just for notoriety or anything like that. They want to make money out of it. So however we can continue to follow wherever the money ends up, or whatever methods or means they're using to take the money, that's where we're going to keep following. We are inherently a you know, reactionary force, right? We're not the Minority Report just yet. We can't see what's going to happen, so we are always playing a little bit of catch up. But we'll just kind of follow the trends and do the best we can.
Well, I think I speak for everybody when I say we're cheering you on in your efforts to protect data
Yeah.
and find and bring cyber criminals to justice. So keep it up. And thanks both to you and Brian for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tanya. Thanks,
Thank
Brian.
you, Nathan.
And thanks to all of you for joining us today on this episode of Spotlight, highlighting the importance of teamwork in data security. Whether it's your IT, SecOps, HR, and legal teams coming together to thwart threats and coordinate data recovery efforts, or if it's your trusted vendors and partners collaborating, integrating and sharing critical information to keep you ahead of the bad actors. Teamwork is critical to achieving cyber resilience. Your input makes all the difference in our segments. So if there is a survey coming your way, and we'd love for you to share your thoughts about Spotlight and what topics you'd like to hear in the future. So thanks in advance for your responses. And with that, it marks the end of our episode. So thanks for joining us. And as always, stay resilient.